This is not my normal maggots.
Screen up just a little because it was
Go for it. Come on.
live.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Jerry's Live. As always, I'm your host, Amy Gardner-Dean, and today's episode is JL163. We've got the awesome guys back again from Royal Talens of North America. We've got Kyle Richardson in a very interesting background there. I'm not sure what's going on, but it's very scenic, and I already wish I was there. And then we've got Jeff Olson, who like me, is trapped in the studio. So
the studio.
He's out on the West Coast, and they're going to be doing, well, I guess Kyle's going to be there answering questions, but Jeff is going to be doing the heavy lifting this week with some, that's right. You got to work on something while you're in quarantine. So he is going to be doing some really awesome demos with the Amsterdam Acrylics. I believe one of them is pouring, which everybody keeps asking for. So I'm glad it's you because I tend to wear all of it. So, but anyway, so they're going to get started in just a minute. If you want to see any of the items that Jeff is going to be using, you're going to go to JerrysArtarama.com. You're going to type in that keyword JL163. It's JL163. You'll hit search, and then it will bring up that list of all the products he's using. And the big thing that he's using, I mean, besides pouring, because pouring is always something everybody loves to watch someone else do. You've got pearlescent and iridescent colors, correct?
I do. I've got a selection of our specialty colors from the Amsterdam standard line. I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes them so special, and then I'm going to show you some applications.
That's awesome, because those are colors everybody always wants, everybody will buy or want to buy, but they're not really sure what to do with them. So it's kind of one of those things that you like, I want it, what am I going to do with that? So now they're going to know, so then they can
experts after this. Absolutely.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. No question.
I'm going to hand it over to you guys and take it away, because I know everybody loves the demos from our 2 other times we've done with you guys. So I would rather them get Jeff full on and in all his demo glory.
Right, perfect. Well, I'll share my screen, and then Kyle and we have a short presentation that we're going to go through here real quick. And you guys can confirm that you see this big acrylic specialty color screen.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Looking good. All right. So acrylic specialty color. So as promised, we're going to talk about the unique qualities of what makes our specialty colors so special. Before we get too much into that, though, I want to talk a little bit about who we are. And Kyle's got some insights to this too. Kyle, if you want to go ahead and go through these.
Sure. For those of you who haven't been with us before in another demo live on Jerry's, I'll just give you a quick little introduction for Royal Talens, which is a company based in the Netherlands, which is where I'm not actually at right now. But I figured we're talking about Amsterdam, so kind of for myself more than anything else, let's throw up some nice canal scenes and beautiful city, beautiful country where these wonderful products are made. I like to call it the capital of color. So Royal Talens was established in 1899 in the city of Apeldoorn in Holland, or the Netherlands. It was actually a venture done by a man named Martin Talens, who was a retired farmer / banker. He was actually buying up property for Dutch people in Texas. At the time, he was a deputy sheriff in Texas before he founded the company. Moved back to the Netherlands and was convinced by a chemist who we met on the steamship back and forth to start up an ink and lacquer company. So he did that in 1899 with his son, and they've been producing fine art materials ever since. They started out making, basically, like I said, inks and lacquers, but quickly after a year or two started making brands like Rembrandt, making fine art materials, and they're still actually based on the same location, which is right in the middle of the city in Apeldoorn, right off the train stop. And they've been producing materials there since 1899. in 1949, they became a royal company, which to Americans doesn't really translate, but it's kind of like being knighted as a company by the Dutch monarchy because of their role in the culture of the Dutch society, and because the royal family, most of them are painters and still are, so they really adored this company and wanted to make them royal. They make brands such as Amsterdam, like we'll talk about today, but also they make Rembrandt, which is Rembrandt oils, Rembrandt watercolors, Rembrandt pastels, Van Gogh as well in watercolors, oils, pastels. They also make Ecoline liquid watercolors. They make Cobra, which is our solvent-free oil painting material. They make other brands like Talens Art Creation at the entry level. So really, they're a broad-based manufacturer of quality art materials. And myself and my team started up our own affiliate here in 2015. So we've been in operations 5 years. Last month is when we started. So it's been a wild and fun ride. We have a lot of fun here, and a big part of what we do is education. Many of us are artists. So it's important for us to educate people about materials and techniques, not just sell products. We're really engaged in the community. So that's kind of who we are in a brief introduction. And I'll let Jeff take it away, and I'll answer some questions. If you see my head down, I'm not ignoring you. I'm actually just answering your questions. So in case you see me up here, that's what I'm doing.
So here's our agenda today, everybody. We're going to talk about in the beginning, the artist and the modern. So this is essentially the history of acrylics. I always love to share some of the history of the materials because it gives us a context of artists to understand how they've developed and how they've impacted art through the years. So I enjoy this, and I hope you guys do too. One of the first things I like to share with acrylics is it is probably the baby of the art material industry. When we talk about oil paints, we're talking, several centuries, watercolor, pastels, even older than that. But it wasn't until the 1930s that the acrylic polymer, which is the binder for acrylic paints, was patented. A gentleman by the name of Otto Rohm, who was a partner in Rohm and Oss, which was a German company, patented the resin. And they were eventually purchased by Dow Chemical, which now is who Rohm and Oss are. But they invented the polymer, and they had a lot of visions for its use. And art materials was one that came about not long after its patent. The first original acrylic paints were spirit-based. That's something folks don't know. When acrylic paints first came out, they were not water-soluble. You still needed a white spirit to thin them out. But they did exhibit a lot of the qualities that acrylics still do today, like their faster drying time and their strength. And that made them very, very popular for artists who paint outdoors. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. The first water-soluble acrylics were developed in New York City and Mexico City almost simultaneously in the 50s. The two brands were Aquatech and Polytech. And those were the first water-based or water-soluble acrylic paints to be out on the market. And these are the ones that are most like what we use today. So that's kind of a history of the medium itself. So who was using it, and where do we see this as we go through the history of art? But one of the groups of artists who used them first and most effectively were the Mexican muralists. So artists like Diego Rivera, Jose Orozco, and David Siqueiros were all artists who used the new acrylics primarily in mural painting. One of the elements or working properties of acrylics that still exist today is that they are alkali resistant, which makes them very, very durable out of doors. So you can paint them almost on any surface. And you can see some examples of some of the great murals done by Rivera here and Siqueiros. And they came to the US during the Depression and were part of the WPA Works projects. And they shared their methods and materials and tools and techniques with many, many artists of the 30s and 40s. Artists like Jackson Pollock, Philip Guston, all studied with these folks during the WPA and learned their techniques. So it's a really interesting history of how these materials came about. So who else was using them? So in the modern age, which is, we look at in this country really taking place after World War II, we go past the abstract expressionists to the next generation in the late 50s, early 60s, and we have artists like Helen Frankenthaler and Morris Lewis, who were color field painters. They liked acrylic paints because of the ability to stain the canvas. Unlike oils, you can paint right onto a raw canvas with acrylics. And so they created these beautiful stains, which you kind of see in these two bubbles here, Frankenthaler and Lewis. And then also the pop artists, like James Rosenquist, who was a billboard painter working with commercial acrylics. He painted these very large scale, almost mural-like pop art pieces, and you can see that as my background here in this image. They liked it not just for its working properties, but the way it looked. It's finished. It simulated or emulated a lot of the commercial art that was inspiring their work. So acrylics were a great medium to kind of communicate that connection to commercial art for pop artists. So this is when acrylics really took off, and now they are probably the most dominant of the painting mediums out there, mostly because their versatility and their ease of use. So that's my super brief history of acrylic paint. Now let's get into what are these specialty colors? What makes them so special? What are they? And I'll tell you a little bit about before we start playing around with it. So this is the color chart here for the Amsterdam Standard Series specialties. The first grouping of colors here, these four are what we call our reflex colors. And I'll talk about what makes them reflex. Then we also have our metallic colors that are these five up here, and then also down here in the pewter and the graphite. And then finally the pearl colors, which if you guys, if anybody was on our first episode where we talked about the watercolors and interference pigments, you're going to get a little bit of a review here because these are the same thing, and we're going to talk about how that whole light effect works. So these are our specialty colors, and they're part of the Amsterdam Standard line. So what's a reflex color? So a reflex color is essentially a fluorescent type of dye. It's not a pigment base, so that's something to discern right off the bat. These are not made with pigments, so that affects their light fastness. But if you are into photographing your work, or you are into sharing your work on social media, digital reproduction is important to you, these can be absolutely fantastic colors because they show up so well in digital reproduction. So what is a fluorescent color? They essentially reflect more light than they absorb, which is crazy to think of. You know, most colors, it's like this one we see on the top. This is a traditional color light. The light waves hit it, and we see the light wave bounce back that helps us determine what color it is. So normal colors absorb and remit the same spectrum of light which they absorb, which makes sense, right? Fluorescence, totally different. Reflex color is totally different. They absorb and convert light energy of the dominant wavelength, which is what we're used to seeing, but also those wavelengths of ultraviolet rays and other colors lower in the visible spectrum. So those are the type of light rays that we don't usually see, but these special fluorescents help us to actually see them with the naked eye. And so that's what we see here, and we call that multi-wavelength. So it not only reflects the dominant wavelength, but it reflects these otherwise invisible ones, and that's what gives us that fluorescent effect, or that idea of the color glowing. So that's how a fluorescent works. It's pretty interesting stuff. And then the metallics, which we talked about too with the watercolors. These are wonderful paints, and they work in a very special way too. We call them two-dimensional pigments that are used in metallics. So these are actual pigments, they're light fast. They work in a way different than a traditional pigment though. They reflect light much like a mirror reflects light. So all the light waves come down, you can see here in these three arrows hitting the surface, and then we get a tone of each one that comes back. So it reflects light like a mirror, almost like white light. And then we get it either being gold or metallic, like a graphite or something like that, based on the actual mica and the oxidation of that particular mica chip and how it reflects. So that's how a mica, or a metallic color, excuse me, works. Two-dimensional light refraction. And then finally, pearl colors. And these are super fun. And these are, like you said earlier, the most confusing in terms of what am I going to do with them. But so let's first understand how they work. So we also call these interference. That's the type of pigment that's used in a pearlescent color. And they're three-dimensional colors. So they're a piece of mica, just like with the metallic colors, that are layered with oxides that create this prism effect, refracting and reflecting the light. So you can see the light waves coming down here and then bouncing off the different surfaces. And the color changes, or at least our perception of color changes, the thicker these layers become. And that's how we perceive it as a particular color, either red, yellow, or blue. So it's the thickness of it as opposed to what it absorbs. So that's how an interference color works. That's 3D color. So it's actually shining through a prism. So that's my quick presentation. So I'm going to enter or get out of that and get into my screen here so you guys can see what's going on there. If I can, there we go. So here's some of the paint. And before I go any farther too, Kyle, help me announce this. These are some of our giveaways today. So hang out till the end and ask a question, and you'll be signed up for one of these guys here too. So we've got one of the pearl sets, which is right here. So those are those interference colors we were just talking about. I've got a 12 color set inspired by Amsterdam, which Kyle is celebrating there with everybody. Yay.
I can keep that with that set.
And then also these wonderful ink sets. I guess it upside down. So there we go. So there's 6 bottles of the ink, and these are the ones that I'm going to show you guys first, and I'm going to show off some of the metallic colors as they work with these. These are wonderful products. So those are the 3 sets that are up for grabs, everybody.
So here's how it works. So what you guys will do, as I'm going to be moderating some of the comments and also answering some questions, at the end, if you stay on till the end, I'll be going through the questions, and I'll be selecting some somewhat random, but also looking at some really good questions. I want to see people really getting into this and really giving it some thought. I'll pick 3 winners, and I'll comment on your question. I'll write it down so I can announce at the end who they are, and then we'll reach out to you through direct messaging, and we'll ask for your address. Please don't put your address in the feed. We don't know what other people might send you, or if they'll stop by for a sandwich. I don't know. So we'll get in touch with you on a direct message, and we'll give those sets away. Yeah, so put lots of questions up here.
Perfect.
That'll be great.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yep.
So the first thing I'm going to share here for this first technique is this pouring medium. This is the large bottle here, 1000 ml, comes in several sizes, but I just want to show this big daddy. So if you're into doing a lot of pouring, there is a big glass bottle of it. I, however, am going to be using this little bottle because I'm much more modest in my demonstration today. This is the pouring medium. So the technique I'm going to show you, I call it a poor man's pour. It's a pour, drip, and tip. It's not a drink recipe. This is actually an art technique. Pour, drip, and tip. It sounds like what some people do after a night out, but no, this is an artist demonstration, folks. Let's keep it clean. Let's keep it nice out there. So the pouring medium, very simply, I've got a little canvas board here. This is by Fredericks. Any canvas board will do. You can do it on toned ones too, especially if you're using some of the interference colors. But I just have a basic white. I think this is like a 5x7 one right here. And you pour a generous tablespoon of the pouring medium on there. So I'm going to let it go. You can also use our glazing medium for this in a gloss, and that gives it a great fun finish too. The pouring medium is more matte like the paint itself. So that was the pouring part. So now it's my tipping part here. I'm tipping it and I'm spreading it out. Now you don't need it to cover the entire surface, and you'll find out why as I get going here, but you do want to kind of evenly spread it around. I recommend for your setup having a piece of paper or a paper towel or something underneath you because you will spill this. That's just part of it, guys. You got to make a mess with art sometimes. So we're getting a nice even surface. You know, maybe it's about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit less. It's not scientific, so you just do what you like. And I think I got a pretty good even coating. So hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah, that looks okay. Yeah, so this is the pouring medium out. So the first thing I'm going to do is take one of the inks. This is the primary cyan, which is a beautiful blue. When you first get them, you might want to shake them up, but after that, it should not separate again. It's a very wonderful, wonderful product. I love it because it's really an extension to my acrylic painting palette. So now I'm just dripping the ink in there. And this pouring medium is what I call pigment hungry. So when it gets the pigment, it immediately disperses it. And you can see how the pigment is blooming so wonderfully on here. You get this nice little halo around the color. And that's the pigment seeking out to fill the medium. And now I'm going to try another color here. These are just the basic colors. I've got a yellow here. This is the primary yellow. These all come out of the sets. So these are the same colors that are in the sets that we just showed that you can win or purchase. So I'm going to do a little pattern here. You can do a pattern like I'm doing. You can be completely random with this. You can see you can go right over the top of other colors like I did right there. I think I'm going to put a couple yellows in the middle here. And you can see now how those pigment are pushing each other. And that's how you know that there's still plenty of medium for the pigment to disperse in. You'll know, somebody always asks, well, when do you know you have too much ink on there? And you'll know you have too much ink when it sinks into the other colors as opposed to blooming. So if you start to lose the bloom and you start to see sinking, then you know you've got too much ink, and you can add more medium after that. So you could literally repeat this process. I'm going to add another color here. I'm going to add this beautiful, beautiful deep gold. Really love this stuff. There's some of that in there. Get some good pieces. It's different colors, different pigments do different things sometimes. And put a little gold in the blue here. So you could just keep on doing this and let it kind of do its thing. I love these little tendrils that you get around there as they start to go out. So you could keep on dipping like this until you got what you want, but the most fun is tipping it. So this is where it starts to look more like a pouring technique. So you just slowly let the colors run. I'm going to tip it in one direction, and you could just do it in one direction and let it go. I'm going to tip it in another direction. Let some of these colors mix. Creates kind of a marbling technique. I also think of this whole process as being very therapeutic. This is one of those things you can just watch and do for hours on end. Usually when I go and I set folks up, I've learned now that I need to give everybody 3 or 4 canvases, because they finish one and they immediately want to do another one. Plus you start to figure out different ways to manipulate the material. I love how it becomes almost like geographical, like land masses. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it gets very celestial looking too. So you can kind of see the kind of fun you can have with it. I'm going to take a palette knife. This is something that's fun to do too. So you can do things like feather color out. You can pull color out like that and create some fun effects. Kind of see that, what I call feathering. You can also wipe out an area, and then the medium and the ink will then fill that area back up. Before it does though, I'm going to show you a trick I like. I'm going to put a little white right through the middle. And this is a feature of these tubes that I really love. They have, I don't know if you can see that completely, but there's a little bend in the pipette, and that helps you control the flow of the medium to the point that you can draw with these things. You can take a regular piece of paper. They're great for all the traditional inking techniques, but you can draw with that pipette. That's how much control you have over it. And here you can see this wonderful line I got, and I'm going to do some back and forth in it. You can see some of the fun ways that you can get the color to play in the surface. I've got some black here. You can get really dramatic in the contrast. And you can pull those together and create a really fun line. Almost makes like these little heart shape. You can also go and pour some too. Like if you think, oh, you know, that area, kind of hard for you guys to see that. Maybe that area got a little dark. You know how fun that is? Mm-hmm. Especially right in there. I love how that turned out. And it's very organic too, but it'll keep on going. It'll take about, at this thickness, it takes about 30 minutes to set up. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily because of the medium. The ink itself dries pretty rapidly and finishes with a matte finish. But the medium, because of the thickness, takes a little longer, but it'll start to set up in about 30 minutes and then it'll freeze it. But until that time, the ink will continue to seek out and fill all the medium. So it continues to move. You can already see how much these black spaces that I put in have changed. I'm going to go in and put a little gold back in there. Black. See how it's starting to sink a little bit? That means that that area is mostly ink now versus having medium. But you can go back in with the medium again and add some back into the mix and let it push the ink out. Create some fun edges. And then go back. Make a little fried egg. Well, I'm going to call that one over easy.
Perfect. Don't touch it. It's perfect.
But you can kind of see how fun it is. So this one's really kind of just an abstract design, but you can get very controlled and measured with these as well. And the more that you do them, the more fun you have exploring the potential of this medium. And like I said, it's a poor man's pouring technique, but it's also something you can control more than you can with a pour. And it's also something that takes a lot less material. There's a lot of waste in traditional pouring that goes off the edge, right? This one you can control more that way. I'm going to go ahead and let it slide and let that black kind of go down. Oh, look at that. That's fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Jeff, do you mind if I shoot a few questions your way?
Shoot a few questions at me.
I'll answer a couple of quick ones that are easy because they're probably going to be repeated. But in the inks, how many colors are available? And there's 56 colors available in the inks, and there's 90 colors available in the traditional Amsterdam standard acrylic paints. They can be used together. There's no issue of, fat over lean. These are basically acrylics, so they're like glue. You can use them in conjunction with each other. Also, types of surfaces. With acrylics, there's a lot of different options for surfaces. As long as it's somewhat porous, it'll adhere to the surface. So of course, if you put it on a really sheet of glass, you'll be able to pull it up. You'll be able to take it off. But in all intents and purposes, it's like a glue. So you can use it on many, many different kinds of surfaces. Other questions? The finish of the paint when it's dry. I would call it kind of a satin gloss kind of finish. These don't dry matte like some. If you wanted them to dry matte, of course, we could talk about lots of different mediums that you could add, like a matte gel medium or a matte medium that's fluid that you could add to make it dry matte or a high gloss, but they're kind of that satin, kind of Goldilocks perfect consistency on the surface. So I'll shoot one to you.
Can I add something to that, Kyle?
Sorry?
Can I add something to that on the finish?
Yeah, please do.
If you're doing this technique, the finish is going to be determined a lot also by the medium that you use. So if you're using a glazing medium, for example, the Amsterdam glazing medium, and it's glossy, you'll have a glossy finish. I'm using the pouring medium, so it's going to be more like the finish of an acrylic paint. A little more matte. So there are variations that you can create with it also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point, Jeff. It really, all the mediums that we have work with not just the paints, but also with the inks. The inks are really a fluid paint. There's just the body that's different. So you have different bodies of acrylic paints. These are like a really more fluid kind of acrylic. So fluid that they can be used with paint brushes, pouring like Jeff's doing, but also they can be used in a dip pen. They can be used in a mechanical pen. They can be used in an airbrush. So they're very, very kind of viscous paints, but they're the same color numbers. So those 56 colors that you have, we have the same exact color matches in the Amsterdam Standard, and many of them also in the Amsterdam Expert. So the difference is you're going to have a heavier body with the Amsterdam Standard. So it's going to be more like your traditional artist grade paint. And then as you move up, you're also going to have the Amsterdam Expert, which has a heavier body. It has more pigment. It's ground more finely. And there's more exclusive pigments like cadmiums and cobalts. So that's kind of the rough run through of the differences between the two.
Yeah, I really like, I think of as a painter, I think of these inks as an extension to my tool arsenal. They are a hyper fluid, highly pigmented acrylic paint, and you can do a lot with them. I like to do details with them because if you thin out the heavier body acrylics, they get transparent, but these, you can dip your brush right into them. There's a lot of great opaque colors, and you can do some wonderful highlights and details with them in your painting. As well as exploring their relationship with the mediums, because they are also functional with all of the acrylic mediums that are out there. You can add these inks to, and you can get some very intense color because you don't have to add as much of the ink as you would the acrylic paint to create a dynamic color.
That's right. And some of the other questions, the interference colors have the same body as the other color paints in the line. It's pretty much fairly consistent. It's one thing with Royal Talens that I've noticed as an artist as well. It doesn't matter really what the pigment is, the body, the handling properties of the paint, whether that's in oils or acrylics or watercolors. They're more harmonious than most lines. So you're going to have the same feeling with a burnt sienna than you will with a phthalo blue, which is kind of a unique property that they have. It's kind of their philosophy as a color house. Question is, I'll let you answer this, Jeff, because I keep answering the questions for you. Do they continue to mix when you stop moving it? And another part of that question is, will they create cells or do you need to use silicone, or what are your thoughts on using silicone?
Yes, they will continue to move. You can see already how they're spreading out. Some of the metallic colors and the whites will also have this fragmentation that's really beautiful. As far as creating cells, you would need to use something like a silicone. How do I feel about that? As long as you're using safe studio practices and have proper ventilation, absolutely fine. Those are the biggest things I would concern, and also waste disposal in terms of environmental concerns. But the acrylics themselves and all the materials associated with acrylics, completely non-toxic and safe. So you would need, though, something to help create cells if that's something that you want to achieve with this technique. Yeah. But you could use the pouring medium and the inks together with your other mixtures like silicone and do a traditional pour and get wonderful cell structures. Yeah, absolutely.
And you could potentially, like you had kind of alluded to, you could use a traditional acrylic paints like Amsterdam Standard to do a pour painting like this, but you would have to add a medium to it to change the viscosity of the paint, which in that point, you're making it more transparent. So if you want a more opaque, more vibrant pour, then using the inks is a better solution than using the paints plus medium. So that kind of answers that. A lot of questions about using these over oil paints. Nope, you don't ever want to use acrylics over oil paints. Not a good idea. The reason being, and you might wonder why, imagine when oil paints dry, they're like a sheet of glass when they dry. So when you put oil over them, for one thing, it's not going to adhere very well. So you might get delamination of that paint layer falling off in parts or in whole. So you can use acrylics as an underpainting if they're either thinned or if you use a medium with them that opens up the acrylic suspension and allows for the oils to anchor into them. But you can never put, I shouldn't say never, you can always break rules, but you'll deal with the consequences. You don't want to put acrylics over oils.
Absolutely. And I can add something to that I've discovered and have been doing myself in terms of creating toned boards for oil painting. We have a wonderful transparent gesso, and there are other brands out there too, but you can use, and I recommend this, use the transparent gesso and then add in hue that you like. So if you like a red oxide type of background for your oil painting, or if you want a bluish violet background, whatever the background color you want, put a small amount of the acrylic paint into the transparent gesso and then gesso your board with that. And the reason that's preferable is because the surface of the gesso is more porous and gives a better surface for the oil paint to adhere to. Just acrylic paint, especially a coat that isn't thinned out with water, makes it harder for the oil paint to adhere. So I think that combination of using a transparent gesso along with a little bit of acrylic paint to give you that wonderful transparent color to tone your boards, works really, really well, and gives you a great surface for the oil paint to build on.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And a few people were asking if you can paint on top of this. And just like we said, once it's dry, you know, you can go over it with another acrylic layer if you want. That's not a problem at all. You could use it as your background if you wanted to. But again, just not with oils.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'll tell you a fun story on some students in a class I did with this technique. We did it on pieces of a plastic pallets, and you can peel up the finished piece like a skin, and then you can cut that into shapes and recollage it into other acrylic paintings. I had one student who actually cut a bunch of them and quilted them together. She sewed the pieces of acrylic together and made this wonderful, wonderful montage of these skins of pores. It was just beautiful. Just beautiful.
Interesting.
So I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, folks. We're going to go on to the acrylic colors themselves. Either standard acrylics here. I've got a beautiful orange, which is the vermilion. I've got our ultramarine blue, and then a azo yellow. This is a great cad yellow substitute, by the way, if you're interested in using something besides cadmium, a nice warm yellow. So these are going to be the colors I'm going to use. I'm going to go and pull my palette over here and put some of these out for you so you can see them. So this is nice heavy body paint. I'm only using 3 colors here. There's no method or madness to my palette set up here, folks. So don't read too much into it. So those are my regular colors. Next, I'm going to put out another color, which is the gold color. This is the deep gold, the same gold that we were using with the inks. You can see that nice gold there. And then prepare to be unamazed. This is a pearl color.
I like that setup, Jeff.
Yeah, isn't that completely underwhelming?
As advertised.
Absolutely underwhelming. But let me tell you, these guys pack a punch. So you see where they get their name, though. They look very much like a big fat pearl on the surface. And I'm going to show you what these guys do here in a minute. So that's my palette setup, and I'm going to set that over here. So here, I've got a board that I prepared. It's just a wooden panel, and I've gessoed it with a black gesso a couple times. And that's why you see this crisscross pattern. These are actually my brush strokes. So you can make whatever surface. You could sand this, make it smooth. You could make this a dark blue. It could be a dark red, a dark green, whatever color you want will be surface. But these dark tones help to show off the magic of the pearl colors, which you're going to see here in a minute. So to prep this piece, the first thing I'm going to do is get into some of those traditional colors. I'm going to get some of that ultramarine blue. And again, on this black surface, prepare yourself to be underwhelmed. There we go. Just a little bit of blue. So remember how we talked about how light is reflected? What's underneath the color you put down has a large impact on what you see. So the light hits this blue, and we see some of that blue come from it, but the black underneath absorbs all the light. So we don't get a lot of reflection. When you look at that blue on the palette, totally different, right? And then you see it on here, and as it dries, you can barely see it. So that's one of the reasons we use pearl colors, and I'm going to show you how that works in a minute. But before I do that, I'm going to put a little yellow down here. I want you to get a good feel for what these colors look like all by themselves. Yellow's got a little more kick, right? This wonderful vermilion. All right. So there's my traditional colors. I'm going to tilt it and move it so you can kind of see how they look on that black surface. Some fair opacity to the yellow and the orange that we're using here. And that's a great cue for me to talk about what is on the tube. I get asked this all the time. So what are these little symbols? So the first symbol here we have is this little square, and you can see it's completely empty. This means that this is a transparent color. Another example would be this color here, which is the vermilion. You can see it's a half dark one. This means it's semi-opaque. If this was completely black, that means it would be completely opaque. And if this just had a line through it, a diagonal line, that means it would be semi-transparent. And those are the 4 categories that you will find in the Amsterdam Standard. These little plus signs here speak to the light fastness of the color. 3 plus signs is the highest light fast rating. This is 100+ years under museum-like conditions. So this is a completely archival color. In the standard series, most of the monopigmented colors are excellent. There are some what we call good lightfast ratings, which are 2+. And then the reflex colors, as I mentioned before, are dye-based colors, and those are fugitive colors. So if you're interested in archivalness and you don't want your paint to fade, look for 2+ and especially 3+. So that's what that symbol is. Other things here are the many languages, of course, that we can talk about for ultramarine blue. This color here is our proprietary color. 504 means ultramarine blue, whether you're painting with this, Rembrandt oils, Rembrandt pastels, Van Gogh watercolors. 504 will always be ultramarine. So that's something you can use. And then one other thing I like to show folks is here on the barcode, there's this little pigment designation. And this is what we call the color index number. Every artist grade or professional grade paint will show you this. That's one clue into knowing that you're dealing with a good paint. This PB here stands for pigment blue. Pigment blue 29, that means there's one pigment used in this, and that 29 is the designation for ultramarine blue. Now, you don't need to memorize these. There's 20,000 of them. So, you know, you're not going to be able to do that. But if you're out shopping and your favorite brand, Amsterdam, is not on the shelf and you have to buy something else because you have to have some acrylic paint today, if you go look at another line and see that PB29 on the back, you know you'll be working with the same color, because we're Dutch. We got names for our colors. The French have names for their colors. The Germans have names for their colors, and they're not always the same. So you can't rely on that to match colors. You need to really look at that color index number. So that's my secret tip for the day, color index number. So that's what's on the tube. So let's get back to what I've got on the board here. So I'm using stencils today. I'm using a TCW stencil, the Crafters Workshop. This one's actually a custom one made for me, but they have thousands of patterns, and I know Jerry's carries hundreds of their items in stock. You can use whatever stencil you want, though. You can make your own. And I'm just going to put the stencil on here, and I've got a rag here, and I'm going to dip it in some water. And I love this technique. So you go in, and you can see what I'm doing there. I am pulling up paint as opposed to adding it. You're used to usually stenciling, and I'll do some additive stenciling here too. But I wanted to show you this because it creates just a wonderful, wonderful effect. You get not only these darker areas that you're adding back in, but by doing this, you're wiping out, but you're also pushing paint under the stencil, which is a no-no typically for stenciling, but you'll see what the result is here. It's pretty fun. It's almost like a mono print. See that?
Nice.
Wonderful technique. So I pulled color back out to reveal the black underneath those colors. You can see it a little bit in the ultramarine. And I did that while the paint was still wet. You know, acrylic, once it's dry, you wouldn't be able to do this. So let's go to the next phase of this project. I'm going to move my stencil to a little bit different location. That's the one rule I will give you to try when you do this at home. Don't put your stencil in the middle, and don't keep it in the same place each time. Think of it as a way to experiment with the color. We're not concerned with creating this exact Amsterdam street scene here for this. So what I'm going to do now is I
just have to interrupt you though, Jeff. One quick thing. Sure. My son Cameron does not like your rule. I just wanted to now, rules are meant to be broken.
Rules are meant to be broken. I always tell folks, do it my way the first time, and after that, I'm cutting you loose. You can do whatever you want after that. Oh, that's great. That's great. I'm going to tell Cameron I will see him again one day.
You will.
All right, so we see what the colors look like all by themselves on black. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take, with my palette knife here, a little bit of the blue. And then I'm going to take some of this wonderful pearl color, and I'm going to mix it up. And you can see it tints it a little bit. But it doesn't tint it like white. If I was using a white with that, it would completely wash out the color. And when it dries, a lot of that milkiness goes away. And I don't know how much of it you can see there, but you can see it also gives it that little pearlescent color. So you don't add a lot of it. A lot of people think if I add this to my color, it's going to make it look metallic, and it doesn't. What it does, it's like putting a bunch of little mirrors into your paint, and it increases the luminosity of the color. So I'm going to set that out on the side there. And I've got a stencil brush here. Our friends at Princeton were good enough to give this to me. Stencil brush is cut off at the top like this. So it makes it easy to do the stenciling technique, which is patting down. So I'm going to get some of that color, and I'm going to go over this yellow with some of the blue that I've mixed in with the pearl color. Now you can use any of the pearl colors. There are several of them. I used a pearl blue to mix with my blue, but you could use a pearl red to create a more violet effect. I'm going to go back over some of this blue area too, so you can see how different it looks mixed with the pearl color than the blue itself. Now I'm not covering my entire stencil here. I'm just doing a little bit. It's also mixing with some of that wet paint underneath, which I think is fun. I'm not looking for the perfect sharp stencil. I really want the paint to mingle and play. Get some fun effects that way. All right, let's see what happened. Oh, nice. So you can already see, if I hold that up, the difference between the ultramarine blue mixed with the pearl color and the ultramarine blue all by itself. So what it's doing is capturing the light, remember that three-dimensional pigment, and it's through a prism shooting it back up and giving us much more luminosity. And it's going to dry, as you see through this whole process, it's going to dry much more blue. Some of that tint's going to go away, where if it had been white, it would stay that way. And you can see the nice overlay. It's a little transparent, and it turned out super fun. I'm going to try this same thing, only I'm going to mix this time, mix the orange I have here with the red pearl color. You can see how well it takes to the paint. So it mixes really, really well. You don't have to sit here and labor it. I'm actually going to grab a little more orange. Yeah, that's nice. So let's see how different this orange looks now. I'm going to put my stencil back down, moving it to a new location again. There we go. Get my stencil brush. All I got here out of the screen, you guys, is just a bucket of water there. So now I'm going to grab some of this, and I'm going to put it over the orange we had before, so you'll be able to compare side by side. Oh yeah, and it's going to look really good over the blue. Complementary colors, right? Pull some of that down here.
In that mixing is where you can really see, to me, the opacity of that red, you know, how much more opaque it is versus the blue when it's mixed with the pearl.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Oh, look at that. Look how that orange with the pearl pops.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. And then here too, you can see it. So there's the orange without anything, and here's the orange on top of the pearlescent. It's just got that little bit more luster, especially wonderful on the blue. All right.
Now, I've noticed over the years, Jeff, a lot of people will say that ultramarine blue is this beautiful blue, but it's not very strong. And I think that's because people don't understand that it's not an opaque color. It's actually a transparent.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think educating people on opacity and transparency is probably one of the most important things about artist grade paints. Because if you don't understand that, you're going to use so much more of the wrong color. There are more opaque blues that are beautiful, but if people keep going back and using so much ultramarine blue because it's so transparent, they're not really using the color as it's intended to be used. So I think what you're talking about with this is really important to understand.
Well, and
It is.
Gone into this too, Jeff, because we've been talking about the index numbers and how to look for them and how to look for light fastness and all that. So I'm glad someone else is saying it and it's not just crazy Amy telling them. So.
My pleasure. It is so important. And you're absolutely right, Kyle. The transparency of a color has nothing to do with its strength. I mean, look at phthalo blue. Phthalo blue is one of the strongest tinting colors out there. it is completely transparent, but you add a little white to it and you will find out how strong it is.
Yeah.
It is just incredible. Yeah. So don't make that mistake. I think that was awesome that you brought that up.
But if you put phthalo blue over a black surface like that, you'd barely see it.
Barely see it.
So it depends on how you're using it, but understanding how to use transparency in your mixes, but also if you're glazing, really helps educate how to color mix. We can't really do it right without understanding that.
No. So I've added a little bit of that pearl red to my yellow now. And I know somebody's saying there, Jeff, you put your stencil upside down. And I said, yes, I did that because we all know that there's water in Amsterdam, the canals. And so now I'm going to do the reflection of the canal, or at least lay the foundation for it. There you go, right there. Look at that. So here goes the yellow. So a stenciling tip, you don't want to get too much paint on your brush. Let's focus into it. So I'm going to put a little yellow. And oh my gosh, the yellow is creeping over there. I was watching Bob Ross the other day. I got to get some tips and techniques from Bob here. How did he mesmerize so many people, so many generations? Okay. So this is the yellow. I'm going to bring some of that yellow, brush it around here. All right. All right, let's pull that off. So this is the yellow mixed with the red pearlescent color. And look at the difference between here. I'll turn it. There we go. Look at the difference there compared to the other yellow. It almost glows.
Yeah, it does.
Right? And unlike a reflex color, this glow is going to stay and it's going to be a permanent light fast color. So if you like reflex colors but want it to last a little longer, then you just need to buy pearls. There you go. All right, so I'm getting some nice depth to color here. So now let's take a look and see what these pearl colors look like all by themselves. So I'm going to get a little of the excess paint and then also create some fun texture with my rag here. Pulling some of the thicker paint off, picking up some paint, creating a nice kind of patina there. So let's get those buildings in there. So let's try just the pearl red. And what you're going to see, partly because of this crazy light that I've got set up, is probably just a milky white, but I'm going to make sure that I give you some different angles as I turn it. And you say, so this is just the pearl color all by itself. This is actually the pearl blue. So it's completely transparent, but as it moves or the light moves through it, remember it works like a prism, not a prism with bars, a prism, that's an M. There we go. I'll brush some of it in down here. Better place for a pearl color than in the water there. All right, let's look at that pearl blue. See what you guys can see. You can already see it's reflectiveness, but as I turn it, hopefully you'll see, well here, definitely down here. You see that blue sheen to it?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to take my word for it a little bit. When you do this at home, it's gonna be much more intense than what you're seeing on the camera. These things just have this wonderful pop to them. So you can use them by themselves. And as that dries, it's going to get more blue as it goes, which is fun to watch it kind of evolve. I'm going to try to do the same here with the red. I'm going to use a flat brush this time because I want to get some different effects with my stencil. So I'm just going to drag this down. So a person who stencils all the time would be like, oh my God, you can't do that. It's just going to pull color everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, yep, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. All right. I'll try a little over here too. The other thing it does too, it builds up these nice edges. And I'm going to show you a fun technique here before I'm done. So there, see? So as I pulled that down, I get this nice little ridge.
Mm-hmm.
color, and that creates some more dimension to it. And that red pearl color mixes with the vermilion. Here I did just a few little highlights of it. Really stands out. All right, now pièce de résistance for this middle building here. Actually, maybe some of the middle building over. Let's put some of those metallics on here. So the metallics really dance. So let's get that gold. Remember, this is our pigment that works just like a mirror and reflects back a whole lot of spectrum of colors. And this is such a beautiful gold. I love this pigment, this color too, in the watercolors. The Rembrandt and the Van Gogh watercolor, the gold is just as intense as the acrylic, which you don't see often. But this is a really wonderful gold too. Fun with it at the bottom. Maybe just a little stripe down the middle. All right, let's see how that gold looks on there. Oh yeah. Look at the contrast of that gold there. There we go. That's fun. Look at the fun marks from pulling the stencil up off of it and taking the wet paint with it and giving us that wonderful texture. So if you really want to see that gold, if that's just not enough gold for you, I'll lay this back down. I'm going to get my trusty palette knife and I'm going to trough that color in there. So I'm filling the stencil. I'm using it for its third dimension, its actual third dimension there.
I like Amy's face right now. That's everybody right now. Yeah.
It's like, oh guys, this is so much fun. It really is. It's fun to do it.
It is. I gotta mention that this is one of the most easy ongoing types of projects with kids because there's no expectation that it has to be done a certain way.
Right.
So you come in and the kids can go for an afternoon and they can keep building up. It's not like, okay, I'm just churning through and I got to keep them occupied. It's like they can just do this and experiment and it just, trust me, it's invaluable for that kind of a project to work that way.
Plus, I think with some of the learners that are the types that stencils really help kids that are not very confident.
Yep.
It really helps them, not shut down, and it gives them something where it doesn't matter if theirs looks like somebody else's. It looks like it enough where they'll keep going.
Exactly.
How fun that is. You see the third dimension to it?
I love how the pearl colors show through the negative spaces.
Yeah.
That's
They're starting to dry, so you're really seeing that dimensionality of it. Oh, and that gold is just so luscious, caked on like that. How fun is that? Oh, there we go. There's a fun view.
oh yeah.
Cool. And that's super cool. Yeah, Kyle's right. These are great for kids. And during COVID, if you're just really tired of talking to your spouse, you get this out and you get a bottle of wine and you just go to work and you guys will rekindle your passion.
Wow.
At least paint.
Guaranteed.
They make bulk packs for that.
We're going to put together the COVID kit. Bottle of wine, a blackboard, and some paint.
Great.
All right, you guys, any questions on this one?
Yeah, Kyle, what do they have?
Lots of questions. Let me get up to some of the more recent ones. People are asking, what kind of materials they can make stencils out of. Honestly, you can, but to get the kind of effect that you're going to want to have a long-term quality stencil you can keep using, they're not expensive. Buy some. They're worth the value. Somebody like TCW, the Crafters Workshop, makes phenomenal stencils with a lot of different creativity that you probably wouldn't have time, or if you had a CNC machine, you could make your own, but then you'd have your own business doing that. So
yeah,
I would say just buy some of those.
Really in a pinch, if you're really in a pinch, milk cartons. You grab that half gallon of milk, and I'm talking the old school milk cartons, not the plastic jug, but the old milk cartons. Those, if you cut them up, they make an excellent stencil. It won't last like these are. And to Kyle's point, these are going to serve you much, much longer and much better, and they're not that expensive. But if you're looking for something on a nickel or a dime, milk carton paper.
It's good suggestion. The gold, does the gold dry glossy? It does not affect the varnish, but the gold dries the same as the rest of the range.
Yep.
Fairly satin to gloss, just like all the other colors.
Yeah, which actually makes it look better too. I think some of the glossier golds come out looking artificial.
Yep.
This one really, especially with yellow ochre, you mix this gold with the yellow ochre, you'll think you're Rembrandt.
Right.
You will be able to create the illusion of a metallic gold substance on your painting like nobody's business.
Yep. Another question was if we, the pricing which was put in the feed for each of the price series, this level Amsterdam Standard just has 2 price series. The next level up does have 4, I believe, price series. That's when you have the cadmiums and cobalts more exclusive. But this range has series 1, and then series 2 is just the metallics, the pearl colors, and the fluorescents. All the other colors are 1 price series.
The Amsterdam Standard is one of the best values out there. I've been painting with acrylic paints for more than 30 years, and the quality you get for the money you spend is very, very good. You get a lot of the features of a professional grade paint in terms of light fastness. You get some great colors, some great opaque colors. So it's really a wonderful color to work with. I use these in tandem with the Amsterdam Experts, and the Amsterdam Experts are just phenomenal paint. But these are fantastic, and if you're want to get into acrylic paint, or you're just looking to shave the budget a little bit, well, you can't get. There aren't very many acrylic paints out there of this value. Yeah.
And they're made in the Netherlands, which I always feel like is a good quality. We know what materials are going into them. They're made on the same mills that make Rembrandt oils, so we know, that quality is important. You want consistency and quality and value. I feel like you get that in spades with Amsterdam for sure.
I just love that.
Fantastic.
Turn that all day, and probably most of us would be like, ooh, ah.
So I'll ask a couple more questions. Jeff, do you want to talk about using either of these acrylics, the inks or the standard, on fabric?
Sure. They both will work on fabric. You won't be able to wash them. They're not a dye base. So if you're looking to make permanent images on a fabric that you can wash in the washing machine, you want to use something that's dye-based. And the reason is the difference between dyes and pigments. So artist colors typically have pigments. Think of pepper. Dyes, clothing dyes especially, but the dyes you use in fabrics, think of salt. So when you stir salt into water, it completely dissolves. And that's what happens with a dye. It completely dissolves. And therefore, when you put it on fabric, it completely absorbs into the fabric and is much more resistant. It isn't light fast, but how many fabrics do you keep around for that long, right? So that's the advantage of dye on fabric. You can paint these acrylics onto the surface, but pigments are like pepper. You stir them up, they eventually sink down to the bottom. They don't dissolve. So what you've got are these pigment particles in a binder, this acrylic, and it suspends them in place, but it's always going to be sitting on the surface of the fabric. So that means it's always going to be subject to being scraped off or removed, and certainly dependent upon how thick you put it on there. So if you're using fabric as a painting surface, no problem with acrylics. But if it's something that you want to wash and wear repeatedly, the acrylic paint with pigmented paint is eventually going to break down.
Yeah. I found that they have a magical property where if you intend to put them on fabric and for them to stay, they won't. But if you get it on your clothes that you wear to work, it'll never come off. That's what I found. Yeah.
material. I have the apron to prove it there.
I know you do. An apron's about 8 inches thick. Yeah.
It will stand up now in the corner by itself.
Good. I'm going to get past the oh wows and the oh my gosh, the gold, and try to get to some questions here. But keep sending more questions because in a little while I'm going to be picking some for the winner, the 3 winners.
Let me see if there's something else. Well, I can show the materials again. So just want to get a look at some of these things. These are the pearl colors. This is what they look. Remember, I showed the symbols of the other colors, but you'll see this is completely lightfast, completely transparent. The pearl colors will also have this little sticker on them. That's different. Besides saying specialty, they have that sticker, and that tells you what this color looks like when it's on a toned background and dries. So this is the red, the pearl red. Looks white inside the tube, but this is telling you what it actually is.
Mm-hmm. Question here. Can you mix the inks in with the Amsterdam standard paint?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe if you have a second on that palette underneath, you could show them kind of. It's obviously going to change the viscosity. It's going to make the inks thicker, the paint thinner, but they absolutely work well together. They're intended to work as one harmonious system.
You know what'll be fun is I'll put this pearl, a little more of the pearl color here. And then I'll add in the yellow that I have. That's just a little bit of color on there, a couple drops. And I'll get my palette knife out. Find my rag here. I'll mix these together. See how much color you get from just a few drops. Oh, you know, this is such a beautiful color here. So this is the yellow ink into the pearl red. And this gold needs some competition here. So I'm going to set this down right next to it. And let's put some of this in there. So this is if you like to use different mediums, if you like a pumice medium or a gel that you're using, these inks can be wonderful to use as the color versus mixing a heavy body paint. You get better pigment distribution, you use less of it. And that's the question I get too sometimes about the inks is the pigmentation and just tons and tons of color in them.
Mm-hmm.
Soften some of those edges. Kind of comes down a little bit. All right, let's see how that looks next to that gold. Oh yeah.
That's nice.
There we go.
So Judy Miller has a question if this can be mixed with cold wax.
Cold wax, there's no, well, I'd have to double check what is in cold wax. My understanding that it's really just a white spirit and wax. I don't think there's any linseed oil in it. If there's no oil in it, it's possible, but I wouldn't recommend it.
No, the spirit, that's what the white spirit would throw me off. I wouldn't mix that in. I don't think these would work well. I think you stick with oils with cold wax.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Then you get into black magic when you start mixing those two things.
I think your best bet to get an effect like cold wax would be to mix the inks with a gel medium.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly. Like a matte.
Yeah, there's so many mediums in acrylics. You don't need to borrow the cold wax. There's other ways to get those effects.
Yeah. There's so many mediums. The Amsterdam line has a wonderful assortment. There are other companies out there that make good mediums that you can. You're never going to exhaust the potential of an acrylic with the variety of mediums that are out there.
Question going back to the pouring technique, which is what's the best canvas or surface to use for pouring? I think you might have mentioned that before, but I'll let you to speak to that.
Yeah, let's pull that back and see how it's faring.
Yeah, because we can talk about the dry time too, because that keeps coming up.
Some of it's still wet. Look at that. Here we go. Here we go. But some of it's also set up. Down here. See how that's not. So you can see where I had it thicker and thinner. But I'm sorry. What was the question again?
The type of surface, the best kind of surface.
That's right. So you want something that's fairly sturdy and absorbent. So this would not be a good technique on paper. I've even had some mat boards or illustration boards warp. So my recommendation would be on a canvas panel of some type, a hardwood panel or a cardboard backing. A stretch canvas would work well. A piece of wood. So something stable like a panel.
Yeah, and I think, the question related to that about dry time, it's always a question that comes up. There are so many variables. There isn't one hard answer to say, oh, in 26 minutes, a timer is going to go off and that's going to be dry. It depends on the absorbency of the surface, the humidity, the thickness of the paint layer. So that's
this is dry up here and it was much thinner. And the more the pool of the pigment, because remember I added that second pour.
Right, right.
That's where the extra is. Yeah.
So we had a question about how large of the tubes. So the ones that Jeff is using right now, the tubes are 120 mil, which is 2 ounces. We make all the way up to 1 liter. And in half a liter, we make all colors. And then we have a new titanium white that's 2,500 liter size. So the Amsterdam standard range comes in quite a wide, it might be the widest student grade color range, and it comes in a lot of sizes, all the way from 20 mil up to 200 or 2,500 mil. So it's pretty diverse. The jars of the Amsterdam inks are in 30 mil, what Jeff's using here with the dropper. They go up to 250 mil as well, but just in black and white.
Oh, and those two are great because they have little nozzles on them that you spray and do drip techniques with, the larger bottles. I was at a demo event and was doing that and just having a blast. I was working on some larger canvases closer to this size, which is 11 by 14. And you can create some really, really fun effects with those larger bottles and the nozzles.
We had some questions here about can pouring medium be used to extend the working time of acrylics when used in a non-pouring situation? No, it's not. That's not the intent for it. If you want to do that, we have acrylic retarders that would help to slow, or a slow drying acrylic medium would work as well. But specifically, the pouring medium is not what you would want to use to slow the drying time down.
Yeah, pouring medium, we always have to reiterate that to people, is pouring medium is designed to level.
Yep.
So as it goes, that's why it can kind of mix and make all those neat things, level out, and that's how you get that spread. So that's what the medium's intent is.
Exactly.
Doing something beyond that that's not its job is going to not yield the results that you want.
No, and it's not a varnish. Somebody asked that too. And it's not that we're saying you can't use it for that because we want you to buy something else. It's that it won't perform as intended as a varnish, because varnishes are very different. You put a varnish on to protect the top layer. It's not always required like it is for an oil painting when you're using acrylics, but it's definitely recommended, because you think about how to clean that surface. If you have to go in and clean it, it's going to be much easier for somebody who's restoring the surface to take the acrylic varnish layer off, as opposed to having to go in and deep clean the acrylic paint and potentially damage it. The other side of it too is that it gives you options for changing the sheen. So when you varnish it, you can pop it up to a high gloss or matte it down to a really matte surface. So that's what the varnishes are for. You're not going to get that from a pouring medium. That's not the intent. That's not what it's going to deliver.
So do you want me to open the screen back up, you guys? Are we getting close to that time, or?
Yeah, I think we are getting close to that time. Do you want to do your winners first, Kyle, or do you want me to do our winners?
Why don't you do your winners? I'm gonna pick mine while you pick.
Okay. All right. So remember how I was telling you guys before we went on that this contest seemed like it had the most entries so far? 798 entries. Yes. And my dog Bob actually is here, and she would have liked to have presented the winners, but she's taking a nap in my office because it's cooler in there. So it's just going to be me. Now, out of those 798 entries, it was impossible to narrow it down, but we've got 3 that are very different. And I think it kind of the best way to go about this was to actually, the contest was the dog days of summer. So we decided to take just the entries that really hit that mark with dogs and seemed like that kind of, great summertime and dogs combo. So, and I hated to do that because I would have liked about 30 prizes. I'm an artist. My love is art, but my passion is dogs, and I show and breed dogs. So this was a very fun contest to do. So 3rd place, Debbie Clausen of El Dorado Hills, California. Golden's Swimming. And I want to know if this is alcohol ink or watercolor on Yupo paper, because it's just gorgeous. The look of the water and the dogs and the texture is amazing. So that is our 3rd place entry. What is more summertime fun than a dog riding shotgun in the car?
Oh, that's awesome.
And there were so many beautifully rendered pieces, but this just was beautifully rendered, and I loved the composition. Just this dog looks like sheer happiness, like it thinks it's going to Dairy Queen, right? So this is called Dog Riding Shotgun by Laura Inninga of St. Paul, Minnesota. So she has won a Jerry's e-gift card as well.
Oh, it's not the name, but I did. So
it's not the name. It's just what she did. So I know who it was. But I think it's an appropriate title if she's interested. All right. Now this one is fantastic. I just love it. Martin Karazoff of Miami, Florida. He won this contest because what looks more like the dog days of summer? He's got hamburgers reflecting in his sunglasses. There's a gull on his head with an empty chip bag. The dog just looks like thrilled to be on vacation. So that was our winner. So
That's fantastic.
Everybody a participation award and some other prizes because it was a joy to look through. So those are our winners this week. Next week, Under the Sea is our contest theme. So anything that's under the sea, I think you got it. You're a shoo-in. So submit those and we'll have those winners next week.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Kyle.
Is it my turn? My turn? Okay. So we have 3 winners. The first one with the pearl set, drum roll, is Judy Miller. And so she's going to win the 6x20 mil pearl set. Second one is a general 12x20 mil, and that's Sanja Vernon. And I've also tagged everybody and commented winner. The other last one with the ink, Amsterdam Ink Basic Set 6x30 mil is Kaylee Berry. So she's the 3rd winner.
Congratulations, everyone.
And she had a quick question that we didn't answer, which I'd like to ask Jeff to answer, but would you recommend using the inks for lino cutting for prints?
Oh yeah, you could use them. They'd be great for that. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Good.
Would it be helpful to add a little bit of retarder just so it doesn't dry into the block and
Depending on how you're working, right?
Okay.
But I think, yeah, certainly you could do that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Good question.
Yeah, I thought it was. So good. Lots of good questions out there and a lot of good comments, a lot of activities. So thank you, everybody that's been here. I don't know how many comments there are, but there's a lot and a lot of questions. So I'll try to answer some of them as the time allows as well.
Well, thank you, Kyle. I appreciate you being coming along for the ride on these and offering, the expert answer. So, our moderators are sharp cookies, but it's always helpful to have someone on the inside to for, you know, the absolute final word on this. So,
They don't call him the pigmentologist for nothing.
right? Right, exactly. And thank you, Jeff, for providing, as always, entertaining demonstrations. But I mean, they're informative. You give, everybody has talked about these last 2 episodes about how much they learned just besides a pretty demo.
Oh, well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
That's Jeff,
My
he's not
pleasure.
just another pretty demo.
I'm appreciative of the opportunity. It's great to be able to reach out to so many folks, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And thank you, Amy, for bringing us on and hosting us. And I want to let everybody out there know, you know, these demos, the work that the folks at Jerry's do to bring them to you, it is a lot of work. And so, you know, pay them back by supporting and frequenting their business, and, you know, whether it's our products or somebody else's, you know. Yeah, you know, it's not,
That. Absolutely.
it's a community. Support the community.
Support
It
the
is. And speaking of community, next week, one of your friends, Kyle, and mine, Ophelia Staten, is actually.
I saw her yesterday in person.
Did you? Oh, she
Yeah.
must. Did she take her son back to school?
Yeah. She's going by on her way home. Yeah.
Well, she is. I've had an injury, and it's very hard for me to do a lot of demo type of stuff. So, being the awesome close friend that she is, and just an all around angel, she's coming to do an abstract demo, and I'm going to paint along with my right hand, which I am not right-handed. So, yeah, so that's what we're going to have next week is laugh, chuckle at Amy and her abstraction, but to be awesome with Ophelia. So
That'll be fun.
yeah, exactly.
Be fun.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. We appreciate it. And for the great prizes for our viewers, and congratulations to our viewers with their Dog Days of Summer entries.
Yay.
And you guys take care, be safe, and we will see everybody next week.
All right. Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
Again.